Here we go. It's time for the RotoWire Rundown. I'm Keith Stewart from Read the Line. Of course, I am joined by my counterpart in crime, Mr. Len Hochberg, the award-winning fantasy writer from RotoWire. Len, good morning. It's Tuesday. Just 7 days till you and I break down Augusta National for next week's rundown. But pump the brakes. Before we get there, we gotta wrap things up in Texas. So let's just start. Right. Good morning. And let's just start with Houston. For a lot of guys, that's going to be their last warm up before Magnolia Lane. What were your takeaways from the Texas Children's Houston Open?
My biggest takeaway, Keith, and good morning to you as well, was that there aren't a lot of top players there. In the past, I think we've normally seen the majority of the top players tune up for the Masters and tune up for a major 2 weeks before, then take the week off to rest, maybe get on site a little early. It's completely backwards this year, where we now have the Valero that is loaded, and there weren't a lot of top guys in Houston. And I don't know why that is. Maybe you have a suggestion. I mean, I guess the signature events and all this playing has something to do with it. I think Houston Memorial Park has a number of characteristics that compare, at least peripherally, to Augusta. Long, wide open fairways, runoffs around the greens, tricky putting and stuff like that. I mean, I guess there are some similarities with TPC San Antonio as well, but that was my big surprise, that there weren't more big names in Houston.
I agree. I mean, for some of these guys, their last warm up might have been the Players going into Augusta, and that's a month apart. I was never a big fan of the match play. I know people love that. I know the players don't love it from being out on tour and covering the guys. And the fact that the top 64 weren't forced to go to a tournament like 3 weeks shy of Augusta, I think has given us in this Texas swing some variety. And yeah, I think that would have been great to have more better players there last week, but we have 11 of the top 30 in the official World Golf rankings there at the Valero. And I think we're going to get a really good contest this week, because for the sixth week in a row since Mexico, we have another very difficult golf course for these guys to contend on. Now, before we go there, pump the brakes for a second. You're not going to hear me ask this question very often, because it's quite honestly not very relevant. But this week, LIV Golf is playing the week before the Masters, and they happen to be on somewhat of a difficult golf course. So as you start to think about next week, the 88th Masters and what's going on, how are you factoring in? Are you going to pay attention at all to LIV Miami this week? Have we finally gotten to the point maybe where the week before major, we look for who's going to try or who's in good form? How are you factoring in LIV Miami to next week for the Masters?
Yeah, I am keeping an eye on LIV Miami, and I have looked at what's going on in LIV this season for my rankings. There are a dozen or so LIV golfers who will be in the Masters field. I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty sure the winner of Miami does not get a Masters berth. I'm fairly certain of that.
No, he does not. No.
Okay. But the Valero does. Miami, no. Okay. No, in all seriousness, I'm considering LIV Miami as much as I am considering the Valero, which isn't a whole lot. There is very little that's going to happen in 1 week across 4 rounds, and maybe even one round that will affect my Masters rankings and what I think. I mean, Brooks Koepka can sleep through 3 rounds in Miami, and he's still going to be, top 5 on my board when the Masters rankings come out on RotoWire next weekend. By the way, in a free article, everybody can view that. You don't have to subscribe. So I think my Masters rankings are, while not set in stone, are sort of, the concrete is drying, and there isn't much that's going to happen in either place short of an injury or something catastrophic like that.
Well, for me, I think this is the first time that we actually think that LIV might be relevant. They're playing a PGA Tour style golf course. They're playing Doral Blue Monster, where the tour spent 50 years from 1962 to 2016. So I mean, I think that is a good test. It doesn't normally happen on the LIV Tour. And then the second thing is that last year, one, two, three guys in the top five, right? Patrick Reed, Brooks, and Phil at the Masters when everyone thought that, they were just, going to ride off into the sunset. So I think that there's kind of a perfect storm of things happening here that we need to pay attention to. Not to mention the fact that I keep saying this to anyone who asks me about early Masters leans is that I don't think John Rahm is a very happy guy. Right. And I mean that in a good way. I mean, he seems really, really motivated. Right now, the futures boards in my world for betting, and he's the third favorite. He's behind Rory and Scotty. Now, I get the Scotty thing, but the Rory thing, Rory played 5 times already this year, and he doesn't have any top tens. So it's interesting to me, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out because there's some perennial Masters guys there. DJ has a green jacket. Of course, Phil, Cam Smith so seemed to be a contender. Patrick Reed has a green jacket. And of course, Rahm's the favorite this week in Miami, so we shall see. The other thing we're going to see is what happens out in Texas at TPC San Antonio. This is kind of a quirky Greg Norman design, and it's pretty vanilla as far as TPC golf courses go. I can't really think of one or two things that are that unique or characteristic about it, but nonetheless, the winner does go to Augusta. What are you favoring this week when it comes to the Oaks course there at TPC San Antonio as you build out your lineups?
It's very interesting to me at the Oaks, TPC San Antonio, that they have, 2 golf courses there. And the other one was designed by Pete Dye. And yet Greg Norman's is the championship course here. It's the one that they are using, not the Pete Dye design. Guessing Jay Monahan did not vote for that, but probably, but regardless, this course is long like last week. And again, another difficult course, like you mentioned. This is much more narrow than Houston. So, fairway accuracy will count more than last week. And we really see a high relationship between greens and regulation and success at this golf tournament. I mean, Corey Connors, who, frankly, not a very good putter, has won this tournament twice in the past 5 years. And I think that really tells us a lot that you could be a great ball striker with just medium putting, not terrible putting. And if you're that good tee to green, which Corey Connors was last year, you can win this golf tournament. So that's what I'm focusing on. Great ball strikers, even though it's a long course, looking at some guys who aren't that far off the tee and with their other clubs, because you do have to keep the ball in the fairway and you do have to get the ball on the green. So it's interesting in that regard.
To build upon that, there's 3 quick things that I think are the secret sauce to getting around TPC San Antonio and, successfully, contend. And the first has to do with approach. This is one of the more difficult golf courses on approach. But when you look at, I looked at the last 10 years worth of top 10s. And these guys really gained on the field from inside 100 yards. So I start to ask myself, like, as a PGA coach, I'm like, why is that the case? What are the opportunities that are there that they're taking advantage of? Well, you have 4 very long par 5s and you have 5 par 4s under 410 yards. I said, well, geez, all of those are going to be under 100-yard approaches. So now you've got 50% of your approach shots are coming from that range. And if you're really good from there, then you can distance yourself. So I would pay attention to short approaches rather than long ones on a 7,400-yard golf course. And that's another kind of trick, I think, to this place is that it's the 7th longest, well, it was the 7th longest course on tour last year. But why is it that, like, Matt Kuchar is up there with Corey Connors in strokes gained? Why is everyone talking about Billy Horschel or Ryan Moore or some of these guys, JJ Spawn winning there? Like, this isn't Rory off the tee, right? And it's 7,400 plus yards and it's so long. So it seems to me like patience off the tee and really aggressive approach play when it's short and you need to score would be very important. And then above all else, my third key for sure is stay away from the bunkers. 64 bunkers dot this landscape, and all but one green has one of these treacherous, sand traps. And then I think 10 of the 14 tee shots are facing sand. They're very jagged. They're just weird shapes. They're deep. They have, fuzzy grass faces. And I mean, I just think perennially the bunker play here pops is something that's very difficult. And when you get around these greens and you don't hit them like you pointed out, then I think you're going to end up in sand at some point, and you got to be a good sand player. And I think your keys and my keys leads us down a road to where we get to the 10K range. The first name that's there, I guess 10K plus, I'll have to say. I have to qualify things with people like Rory and Scotty in these fields. Speaking of which, there's the man, Rory McIlroy. One trip here, missed a cut. Does he make your list in the 10K plus land?
Rory has completely changed around his schedule this year. He announced that before the year to prep for the Masters. He's going to play more. I don't see how anyone could say that this plan has been a success so far, but I guess it all matters what happens next week, whether it's a success or not, because really everything that happens beforehand, I don't think he cares if he can put on the green jacket next week. But he has not been playing very well. For Rory, he's been getting top 25s every week, but no top 10s, as you mentioned. So he is not on my list for this week. I really think he's going to be at least having one eye next week on Augusta. And a lot of these guys, even though they try to win this week, they do try and work on things, I think, that will come into play next week. It's sort of practice play or play practice, whichever you want to call it. So the two guys in the five figures, in the tens that I'm looking at are Hideki Matsuyama and Ludwig Hochberg. Both playing very well right now, especially Hideki, who has won at Riviera. His back issues, which have been an issue for 2 or 3 years now, seemingly gone, although we know these things can recur in a heartbeat. But for now, he's great. And Hochberg did not have a good start in Hawaii, but in California and in Florida and in Texas, he's been playing very well and great. Both great iron players, both great approach players. Hochberg also great off the tee, a good fit for this course.
Okay, down to 9K range. We've talked about him. You can't get around talking about him. 2 wins in the last 4 editions. The sheriff of San Antonio, Corey Connors. Is he in your 9K portfolio, or we got somebody else?
Yeah, he's in there. Once in a while, I try not to overthink these things. And a guy wins on a golf course twice. I mean, granted, the field is much better than I think any of the field than the Valero that we've maybe ever seen before. So that is a factor. But he's still 90. He's still one of the top guys in the field. And I do like Matt Fitzpatrick. And Matt Fitzpatrick may not look really good statistically coming in. A lot of his numbers are off. But as we saw, he made a driver change right before the Players, and whatever that was, it was just a magical flip the switch because he finished 5th. And so I think, for this week and for next week, Matt Fitzpatrick, even though his numbers don't pop, we'll have to take a look at him, and I do this week as well.
In the 8,000s, I'm hearing so much chatter about Billy Horschel, Billy Ho, right? Do you believe the hype?
I do. I mean, he's not that old. What is he, mid-30s, 36, 30-something? He's not in his 40s. And, because when we see guys sort of fall from the top 20, 25, and he went to like 100, close to 100th in the world, is that it for him? Is he now counting the years till the Champions Tour? But I thought he was too young for that. And, I think this is a good fit for him. A good golf course for him, and he has been playing well, so I do like him. And Alex Noren, who might be the best golfer right now, who's not in the Masters field, and unfortunately, unless he wins this week, will not be going to Augusta, but he's been playing very good golf, and he was on the periphery of contending last week. Those are my 2 favorites in the 8s.
7K land. A lot of, very popular names over the last 4 to 6 weeks that are landing in this zone, because quite frankly, 11 of the top 30 players in the world rankings are competing this week. You've talked about strength of field. So is there some strength in the 7K land?
Yeah, there are a few guys I like more than in the 8s. I want to say something about Christian Bezuidenhout, because I don't understand what he's doing here. Because he was 55th in the world going into last week in Houston. And basically, if he would have played, he would have needed maybe a top 10 or something like that to just move up 5 spots to get into the top 50 in the world and get into the Masters. But he took last week off. He's playing this week. Now he has to win this tournament to get into the Masters. I mean, I realize he may have been playing a lot and all that, but really, you got to take your shot to get into the Masters and play last week. I don't get this at all. He's now 58th in the world. That's irrelevant because he has to win. It doesn't matter what his ranking is. So that said, he has been playing very well this year. I do like him. Aaron Rai, who played very well last week, just hits the ball so straight, tee to green. I think a good fit for this golf course, and the fact that he played well last week shows he's coming in with a little bit of form. And Keith Mitchell just did not have it last week, and that might have been a hangover from his Sunday 77 at the Valspar, where he just had a chance to win, and he was the leader, and he fell. And I give him a pass for last week, is just maybe not getting over that Sunday disaster. But he's played very well this year as well.
I tell you, Aaron Rai, he might be a poor man's Corey Connors. There's no doubt. I mean, they both putted about the same, but holy moly, those two guys can ball strike it. They are straight flushers. And, in that price range, I can't, on a golf course like this where you have to hit it straight and you got to accumulate a ton of greens and regulation. Aaron Rai really catches my attention, even with the two gloves. Now, 6K land, 40 something guys down here. Here's where we need you, Len Hochberg. Here's where you win awards 3 out of the last 4 years. 6K, we'll just start there. 6K, help us out.
Doug Gim in the 6,000s, missed the cut last week, had a kind of a rough week the week before at the Valspar, but again, a good fit for this golf course, been playing very well. Maybe he's been playing too much. I mean, he had 5 top 16s in a row. That had to end, and it has ended. And the fact that he missed the cut last week is actually a good thing in my mind, that he had a little bit extra break. He's got a weekend off. He didn't have to play 4 rounds. He played 2. Maybe he had a chance to regroup, recharge. Andrew Novak been playing very well lately. And Grayson Sigg, who's down at 6,000. I've been looking at Grayson Sigg more than anybody outside the Grayson Sigg household, I think. The man is 31st on the PGA Tour in strokes gained tee to green. Maybe the most important metric of them all. 31st on the PGA Tour. Fantastic. 163rd in putting. Really, really bad putter. And that to me screams every week, or most weeks, made cut, not a high finish. Okay. So if he can putt just a little bit, he's only $6,000.
I mean, typical Norman design, right? Make the driving a lot of fun, risk reward off the tee, and then make the greens flat because he couldn't putt. Like that. That's why we're talking about Corey Connors and Aaron Rai and, of course, Grayson Sigg. It's a great find, and we're gonna need a flashlight and a map down here in the 5K land in this field. So I think it's interesting. A year later, the runner-up Sam Stevens is now in a 5K land. Do you go back there, or got someone else of a person of interest?
I did that last week with Tyson Alexander, who was the runner-up in the Valspar or Houston last week.
Yep.
And he was at 5,300, and I did have him, and he made the cut. It wasn't a high finish, but I did not go to Sam Stevens this week. 2 other guys, and it was a little trickier than normal in the 5,000s, which are always tricky. Justin Lauer, 5,700. Ben Martin at 56. Ben Martin tied for 10th here last year, so I am going back to somebody who did play well here a year ago. And he also played well in a Corn Ferry event in San Antonio on this course in 2020, when there was no Valero because of the pandemic. There was a Corn Ferry event at this course, and he finished 9th, obviously in a far weaker field.
Which of the 2 names finished 9th there in the Corn Ferry?
Ben Martin finished 9th in a Corn Ferry event in 2020 at this track. Not Justin Lauer, but just another guy I like this week, whose numbers sort of tell me that he should play well or could play well here.
I just wanted to clarify for all the listeners there. And, when you start to go down the road of betting this week, obviously the chalk at the top is Rory. It has not been a very chalky year outside of when Scotty's putter decides to show up. So I'm going to breeze past him. I'm with you. I think Rory's overthinking the green jacket just a bit too much, and I have a tough time understanding whether or not he's going to be focused this week on San Antonio over what he's getting ready for next week. That the classic look ahead week for somebody at the top of the board. At the top of the board, you mentioned his name already. I love Hideki in this spot, and probably the best reason why, outside of the fact that he had one of his like really best ball striking weeks. Going back when you look at him. What was he? Top 10 at the Players, right? And it's just one of those things where typical Hideki started slow and then he jumped in and then he played very well closing there. And for me, man, sitting there at 20-1, I almost feel like he's the favorite in the field. And his short game is so much better from 100 yards and in than Rory's. Or, I mean, Spieth would be up there with me. But, I mean, we haven't seen Spieth in I don't know how long, months or whatever. I mean, this guy's won twice in 2 years. I know one of them was here, but, I mean, he's won twice, in 6 years. So, for me, I'm going to go with Hideki at the top of the board. The short game's the secret there for sure. And then I also like, and you brought him up, maybe he knows something we don't, but Christian Bezuidenhout sitting there at 50-1. This event has had a bunch of long shots win, none more long than the Monday qualifier Corey Connors back there 5 years ago. So for me, 13th at the Players, 9th at the Valspar. Bezuidenhout is definitely a really good approach player and also can putt. So where even he has an edge over Hideki, when it comes right down to it. But we've seen in the past that, guys like JJ Spawn and Corey Connors aren't the best putters in the world, and they have excelled at this place. So for me, Hideki and Bezuidenhout is where I'm heading. And you know where we're both heading a week from now is right down Magnolia Lane to cover the Masters, right? So I know you've been digging in. I know you rank all the players 1 through 88. Maybe we'll get an 89th this week. But for me, who so far, I'm curious, because you do a deep dive. Whose name has kind of popped so far this week that you're like, that's interesting for next week?
I think with next week, the Masters, maybe more than just about any other week, I really put a heavy weight on past performance there. They always say you can't find your game at a major and stuff like that. But I don't know so much about that because guys who play well there year after year after year, I think that matters more than how you're playing coming in. That said, Hideki is playing very well coming in. He's not going to be on the first tier of Scotty, Rahm, Koepka, Spieth. You'll probably be able to get it. I haven't seen the numbers. You may have seen the numbers on the Masters for Hideki. You probably can get a pretty good price on him. But I can tell you he's going to be in my top 10 in the rankings. And Tony Finau, who has not been amazing this year, but he plays well at the Masters almost every year, whether his ankle is fine or not. Plays well on a dislocated ankle. And his strokes gained, his approach play, has really been very, very good this year. He tied for second last week, and he was sixth at the Farmers. So he's had something, he just hasn't, he's fallen to, pretty far in the rankings. I think he's like 30th, or he was last week before he came in. But those two guys, I think, are going to be, in the conversation, but not in the heavyweight Rahm, Scheffler, Koepka, Spieth range. How about you?
Well, I mean, you bring up Spieth and Hideki. I mean, talk about two totally different trajectories. And to answer your question, Hideki's sitting right there at about 30-1. And I mean, that's a great idea for a futures play right now, because chances are Hideki's going to finish top 20 or better here at the Valero, right? He's got 3 starts. He's got a withdrawal. He's got a 30 and a 15th. So he can play this golf course. And he's obviously playing very well. That number is only going to get cut shorter should he finish in the top 20 or better. And let's say Hideki, outside of a crazy injury sort of controversy, and even if he misses the cut, that number is not going to get any longer. So, I love that look right there. I think he and guys like Fitzpatrick are certainly somebody that are sitting in that middle tier that you got to pay attention to. And I mentioned it earlier, right? I think Jon Rahm's got a whole lot to prove going into next week. And it just, when you start to look at Rahm's history there at Augusta and you talk about horses for courses, I mean, at the end, we say it every year. It's the most predictable course on the PGA Tour year after year after year, Augusta National Golf Club. So those are a couple of guys that already early on, I just can't get my eye off of. And, you're spot on in your analysis as well. Now, we all don't want to do it, but we got to wait 7 days till the RotoWire Rundown for the 88th Masters. So on behalf of Len Hopper and myself, Keith Stewart, we'll see you in a week.
Enjoy the Valero, and I guess next time I see you, you'll be in Augusta next week by this time next week. So that is fantastic. I'm getting chills for you just thinking about that. So looking forward to next week.
I've already got my green on. I'm ready.